Believing in something that isn't true doesn't just affect your private thoughts. It changes how you live, how you treat others, and how you see the world. When a lie becomes a part of someone's worldview, it becomes more than just a mistake. It becomes a foundation for decisions, relationships, laws, education, and even war. Lies cost something. And when a society is built on them, the price can be enormous.
That's true. For example, many Reddit forums like r/atheism are infamous for their information based on historical fallacies and plastic idols that sell you the story that they are free because they abandoned religion.
When people believe the earth is flat, or that vaccines contain tracking devices, we know those ideas aren't just silly. They're dangerous. They lead to real consequences. Kids die because their parents reject medicine. People waste money, time, and sometimes their own lives on beliefs that have no basis in reality. And when it comes to religion, the lies aren't just individual. They're organized, deeply rooted, and passed down like sacred truth.
Let me tell you something else that's also dangerous. Believing that the government or the pharmaceutical industry won't harm us is even more dangerous. Some people died from the AstraZeneca vaccines. There was a scandal involving the GSK vaccines, Plusarix, in Canada in the 1980s, which were shipped to third world countries where thousands of children suffered. Or you can look at the countless crimes committed by states throughout history, or even your beloved science, which often supported ideas like electroshock, lobotomy, or PCBs during its golden age. This is something that atheists tend to ignore, since these agents are beneficial to you and your worldview, which is often blinded to the world in which we live.
Beliefs shape behavior. If you believe you're being watched by an invisible being who rewards obedience and punishes questioning, it changes how you think about freedom. You're less likely to question authority, more likely to accept suffering, and more likely to think that your pain has some secret purpose.
Another thing atheists ignore is that critical thinking is a double-edged sword. It can support their worldview of nihilistic debauchery masquerading as freedom, but it can also be used to question that debauchery and the plastic gods they helped to create, like Christopher Hitchens, an alcoholic and chain smoker in his lifetime. That's when critical thinking stops being a positive thing, and they start labeling people who question them as religious fanatics who hate people's freedom and critical thinking. Freedom and critical thinking are of no use if they only serve self-satisfaction.
You stop looking for real answers and start telling yourself that your suffering is divine training.
Remember that often, the debauchery that places humankind as the center of the universe, according to humanists, has created the world we live in, a horrible world where dystopias are sold as progress, and where the present and future are worshipped as a product to be consumed and live our lives without worries. But in reality, drug use has increased, and dependence on technology has increased. In short, we have created a nihilistic and narcissistic being who thinks the world he lives in is an excellent place.
This kind of thinking doesn't just hold people back, it holds entire cultures back. Look at the way religious lies have been used to justify violence. The Crusades, the Inquisition, suicide bombings, witch hunts. These aren't accidents. They happen when belief overrides reason.
Don't forget that the lies humanism sold us have caused humanity, the cult of narcissism, nihilism, the class struggle that led to the corrosive ideas of communism and socialism, the normalization of pedophilia, pseudosciences such as gender studies, gender ideology, or psychoanalysis that contributed to sexual debauchery, the Frankfurt School that gave rise to the cultural Marxism we live in today, toxic groups on social media that cherry-pick science to make it conform to their goals, the cult of abortion and contempt for the family, etc. Humanism has caused more harm to humanity in a way worse than any war, as it created a Stockholm syndrome where humanity screams in a mental position that everything is fine and that those toxic ideas sold by atheists and humanists are something healthy. Reason is ignored in the name of the feelings of the oppressed people, because if reason were honest, humanism would cease to exist as it would be based on toxic ideas.
When people are taught that a holy text is above questioning, the door is open for cruelty. You can torture someone if you think their soul needs saving. You can kill someone if you think their death serves a divine cause. These aren't the actions of monsters. They're the actions of people who think they're doing something good. That's what makes it so dangerous.
This is more dangerous than a religion, as it is material and is sold as something good, the progress of a civilization, individual freedom, when in reality, this is not the case. It is a cult of social degeneration and hatred of tradition, considering it dangerous and obsolete.
When lies are baked into culture, they get passed on before you have the ability to reject them. Children don't choose what to believe. They're told what to believe, usually by people they trust most. And once a lie is wrapped in love, tradition, and identity, it becomes almost impossible to remove. You're not just changing a belief, you're challenging your family, your past, your entire sense of self.
That concept is fine, but the problem is that many times we just change our chains thinking we've freed ourselves. Many people became atheists because they were brainwashed into thinking that this was liberation. The longer people believe they are free, when in reality they aren't, the more adamant they will be about not questioning it, because according to that person, it would question their freedom, which they shouldn't do. I, for example, do that, and you do it too. Humanity is built on manipulating each other to become their own slaves to their thoughts and ideals, as if a demon were distracting you from reality through material things and the senses. Something Descartes said, I think, therefore I am.
That's a huge cost, and most people would rather stay in a lie than face that kind of internal conflict. Religious institutions understand this. That's why so many focus on early indoctrination. Children are taught stories as if they're facts, told to recite prayers before they understand the words, and made to fear punishment before they even know what real morality is.
The same thing happens today in secular schools and the media, where the LGBT flag or plastic gods like Martin Luther King or Margaret Sanger are glorified as freedom fighters for young children. Before the age of 12, the media and schools impose on children that sex is only pleasure and not responsibility, that your genitals don't define your sex and that genital mutilation will make you the opposite sex, that material things will bring you happiness, and that the traditional family is evil and backward, ignoring what true happiness is. This massive propaganda machine created by the heirs of humanism is something the most manipulative sects and the most selfish dictators would love to get their hands on.
By the time they're old enough to ask serious questions, they're already emotionally invested. Doubt feels like betrayal. Curiosity feels like sin. That's not education, that's control. And it's not just about control of individuals, it's about controlling entire societies.
This control of societies, as I've already said, is already being carried out by humanism today. If you question the propaganda that the educational system and the media give you, you feel disappointed and you see that this ideological control has become so latent that it has transcended humanity since the end of World War II.
Religious ideas have been used to shape laws about marriage, sex, education, women's rights, and more. Not because those ideas are based on evidence or reason, but because they fit an old worldview. A worldview built on myths. In many countries, women can't drive, can't speak in court, or can't leave their homes without a male guardian. Not because of any rational argument, but because someone long ago claimed that's what God wants. That's the cost of lies. Real people suffer. Lives are limited. Potential is wasted.
With humanism at the forefront of the world we live in, people live believing that radical feminism isn't dangerous, that abortion can't cause problems like breast cancer or damage to the fetus if it's too late in development. Sexual debauchery is venerated to the point where some people call for the legalization of sexual deviations like pedophilia and bestiality. All of this just because a man decades ago said it was a cure for fascism, a world where illegal immigration is said to be a positive thing and that racial diversity should only be in the West and not elsewhere, all because of a man who said that a multicultural society will make a society better. A world where environmentalism is glorified to the point where everything has been deindustrialized and we're moving towards a dystopian model based on zero growth due to outdated ideas from centuries ago, where humanity must limit its population by resources, wasting scientific potential in being able to create raw materials. Where people are arrested for posting their concerns on social media for an alleged hate crime. Those ideas sold as human progress aren't really progress. They're just white lies to make people with mental problems happy, ignoring the true progress, technological progress, that should take us to the next level as a civilization.
Even in more secular societies, the effects linger. People still swear on holy books in courtrooms. Presidents still reference God in their speeches. Churches still receive tax exemptions while hospitals go underfunded. The cost isn't just spiritual, it's financial, political, educational. Billions are poured into churches, temples, and mosques every year, while science departments and schools are cut. People tithe their income to religious leaders who live in luxury while their followers struggle to pay rent. That's a transfer of wealth based not on merit or need, but on myth.
Today, millions of dollars in taxpayer salaries are being spent on dystopian projects like Agenda 2045, carried out by useless supranational organizations like the UN, controlled by BlackRock, Vanguard, and their owners, the Rothschild family, the Club of Rome, the Bilderberg Club, and the Trilateral Commission. Organizations that want humankind to have nothing and be happy in this horrible world they want to lead us to. Where science only serves the environmentalist cult and cultural Marxism, where organizations demanding the separation of church and state give free rein to Freemasonry. Where education and healthcare are a cover for political corruption and empty promises in elections.
And when people believe that life on Earth is just a temporary stop before the afterlife, they start to care less about the future of the planet. Climate change doesn't feel urgent if you think the world is about to end anyway. Social problems don't need solving if you think divine judgment is coming soon. That mindset doesn't encourage progress. It encourages apathy. And apathy, when multiplied by millions, is dangerous.
The climate narrative is exaggerated by the media and supranational organizations to create a shock, successfully pushing unpopular and dystopian ideas as something positive for society. They waste the potential of science on making fake meat or projects like 15-minute cities instead of using science to create machines to recycle fabric, machines to create nuclear fusion energy, and machines to clean plastic. The media will ignore it and give more support to charlatans like Vandana Shiva, Bill Gates, or Greta Thunberg and their crazy ideas that show they don't understand the world. The same thing happens with governments that grant privileges disguised as rights to groups like LGBT people or feminism, demanding more laws that grant them privileges. If someone sensible takes that away from them, a rebellion erupts to regain those privileges. This is true apathy, where impulses dominate reason, where a material story wins over facts to peddle fallacies.
There's also the psychological toll. People who grow up in religious environments are often burdened by guilt, fear, and shame. They're told they're born sinful, broken, or unworthy. They're told their thoughts are watched and judged constantly. That kind of pressure creates anxiety, depression, and a deep fear of imperfection. Instead of learning to think critically or accept themselves, they learn to perform obedience and hide their doubts.
Humanism, paradoxically, created a world where there is a cult of physical beauty that creates thousands of narcissists, like the body positive movement, or hundreds of cases of teenage suicides because they see themselves as ugly. This unbridled debauchery has brought many negative consequences, such as the rise of super-individualism, the dissolution of nations, the cult of materialism, the rise of STDs due to the idea of sex for pleasure, a rise in depression and anxiety due to social media. Critical thinking is only taught for self-satisfaction and to question what is against the religion of secular humanism, not to question it, as that would be offensive or fascist.
Some spend their whole lives afraid of being honest, with others and with themselves. The worst part is that many of the people spreading these beliefs genuinely think they're helping. They think they're saving souls, guiding people to truth, offering hope. But sincerity doesn't make a lie true. And good intentions don't cancel out the harm done by false ideas.
Atheism and humanism do the same, selling themselves as if they joined them they would be free, where everything would be better, but they will inevitably fall into debauchery and that has negative consequences such as narcissism or depression. Selling false truths as truth, as critical thinking, as freedom, without knowing that they are just golden chains.
We can't excuse harm just because it comes from a place of faith. If anything, we should be even more cautious with beliefs that bypass evidence and demand trust without proof.
We must also be wary of charlatans who pose as scientists to push pseudosciences like homeopathy or sexuality studies that justify genital mutilation and hormones to change sex.
Faith is often praised as a virtue. But faith, by definition, means believing without evidence. And when that becomes a standard for truth, anything can be justified. People have faith in conflicting gods, contradictory books, incompatible stories. They can't all be true. But faith doesn't care about contradiction. It only cares about loyalty. That's not a path to truth. It's a way to silence doubt. And doubt matters. Doubt is how we learn. It's how we discover mistakes, test claims, and move forward.
In this modern world, based on secularism and the cult of the feelings of a minority, you can't question some lies without being labeled a conspiracy theorist, no matter if things like critical race theory or gender studies contradict and rewrite history. It doesn't matter if the justifications for not considering gender dysphoria a psychological problem come from a 20th century guy who ignores the laws of biology. That doesn't matter, since the important thing for secular humanism is to obey those feelings and sell them as science, even though they're simply nonsense. It's like saying that the miracle mineral supplement is a scientific treatment. Is that nonsense? Yes, but you couldn't say it because it would offend people who say vaccines cause autism. That's why we should talk more about ending these pseudosciences that only harm people and are based on someone's imagination.
When doubt is treated like a problem, progress stops. Science, medicine, ethics, all of it depends on our ability to question what we're told.
Ironically, this can be applied to the Committee of 300, who helped prevent technological progress that would dismantle the theory of limited resources, technology that would make nuclear energy increasingly safer, which could make developing countries no longer dependent on the IMF and the World Bank, science that would dismantle Hirschfeld's theories on sexuality, data that would challenge the romanticized narrative of sex as pleasure inherited from the sexual revolution, etc. Condemning humanity to live in a dystopia that the elite sell as progress.
If someone says the earth is 6,000 years old or that diseases are caused by sin, we need to be able to say, let's check. That's not arrogance, that's responsibility. Throughout history, we've seen what happens when lies are treated as sacred. Galileo was silenced for suggesting the earth moved. Doctors were punished for suggesting hand washing could save lives. Every step forward has required the courage to doubt accepted beliefs.
Galileo was never convicted or tortured, he was merely placed under house arrest for parts of his theory he misinterpreted. The church accepted Copernicus's heliocentric theory years before his death. The idea that doctors do not wash their hands was not the work of faith, but because the science of the time did not know that bacteria could reproduce if something was not sterilized. It was only known that bacteria, insects and mold were created by spontaneous generation as it was believed since ancient Greece, and several scientists supported that idea, until Pasteur and Semmelweis dismantled that obsolete theory.
And yet, in so many places religion is still treated as untouchable. Criticizing it is taboo. Questioning it is offensive. That's not how healthy ideas work. Strong ideas welcome challenge. Only fragile ones demand protection.
That explains why there are laws that prohibit questioning certain things on social media, such as the theories of sexuality inherited from the Weimar Republic or the erroneous ideas that feminism gave us in the West.
There's also a cost to the conversation itself. When lies are off limits, truth becomes harder to reach. People stay silent to keep peace. Debates get cut short. And those who speak up are labeled as disrespectful or rebellious.
Ironically, you are proving what I am saying, especially with the news of harassment of people who question what modernist humanism says.
But avoiding discomfort isn't the same as being kind. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is ask hard questions. Because when no one is allowed to question, those in power get stronger, and those without power stay voiceless. Believing in lies doesn't just delay truth, it creates entire systems built around the lie. And once those systems are in place, they defend themselves. They label critics as evil. They call facts dangerous. They rewrite history. And worst of all, they convince the people inside them that to leave is to lose everything.
Thank you for describing many Reddit and Discord groups, where they are the digital version of a cult, where data doesn't matter, only the defense of the cult. If you are not accepted, they block you.
That's not belief. That's imprisonment. But the good news is that lies don't last forever. They can be challenged, exposed, dismantled. It takes effort. It takes risk. and it often comes at a personal cost.
How to get death threats on social media or get arrested for posting something that debunks postmodern nonsense. Look at the UK, where they arrest you in the name of tolerance and human rights.
But the cost of living in lies is always higher. A world where people are free to think, question, and grow is a better world. Not just for scientists or skeptics, but for everyone.
It's a shame this world will never exist, since today, in the name of human rights, which are actually privileges disguised as rights, you are the object of hatred by many people who consider you a conspiracy theorist.
Because the truth doesn't require fear to survive. Only lies do. And that's why questioning matters. That's why truth matters. Because every time we excuse a falsehood, every time we protect an unexamined belief just because it's familiar, we make it harder for others to speak up. We make it harder to grow. And we make it easier for the next generation to inherit the same illusions.
It's a shame that atheists never do what you preach to us on social media, especially those who sell atheism as liberation.
The cost of believing in lies is measured in lost potential, broken lives, damaged minds, and halted progress. And the longer those lies are protected, the more expensive they become. Truth doesn't need rituals. It doesn't need temples. It just needs people willing to ask, is this really true?
Miguel de Unamuno once said that universities are the temple of intellectuals. In general, libraries and universities are temples of knowledge, and this has been known since the Enlightenment as a metaphor for understanding their importance in a person's intellectual life.
That question has changed the world more than any prayer ever could. So maybe it's time we stop treating lies as sacred. Maybe it's time we value questions more than answers. Because no matter how comforting a belief might be, if it's not true, it's not worth the price.
The libertinism brought about by humanism is not the solution to problems. It only brings a relativism that makes human beings act out their instincts. The problem atheists have is that faith has become democratized. It is no longer monopolized by traditional religions. Many things can be sacred to many people. They can be toys, people, ideologies, or virtual beings. Faith is important in our lives. It is part of the sacred canopy, along with the social order, where human beings seek anything to feel better and collectively protect themselves from harsh reality. Since the 1950s, this faith has become even more democratized, but in a secular way, as I mentioned at the beginning. Ironically, if a society persists in questions, it will become nihilistic, since by focusing only on questions, people will begin to feel empty. That's why we need to be wary of people who say we should focus on questions, as they may do more harm than good to the public. What open question proposes only works in science and engineering, but our world must have solutions to make people feel better.